Shoreline residents have a huge responsibility to take action and contribute to ensure a clean and healthy watershed. Why is a healthy shoreline important? Shoreline vegetation plays a big role in keeping our rivers and lakes healthy. It provides several services essential to maintaining the quality of water and the health of our ecosystems and biodiversity. Here are some of the services. Retention. The vegetated shoreline holds water in the soil, thus reducing rates of runoff. Erosion control. The roots of the plants and trees retain the soil, thus stabilizing the banks by limiting erosion and landslides. Vegetation also offers resistance to the effects of wind, rain, waves, and ice. Habitat. The shoreline vegetation provides food and shelter for a number of living organisms, thus helping retaining our biodiversity. Filtration. The shoreline vegetation absorbs some of the pollutants in the runoff flowing towards the river and streams, such as fertilizers, pesticides, and road salts. Shade. The shade produced by the shoreline vegetation protects the water from the sun's rays, thus regulating the water temperature, preventing excessive warming. This limits the proliferation of unwanted aquatic plants and provides shelter and freshness to fish and other species. It's also worth mentioning that shorelines are more beautiful when made up of natural, native, flowering plants, don't you think? Given that a healthy shoreline is important, let's look at what efforts you can make as a shoreline resident to contribute to a healthy river or lake. Avoiding toxic household items. Some of our human habits and activities near bodies of water can have a harmful impact on water quality and biodiversity. Here are some examples. Flushing chemicals like microplastics found in cosmetics and chemical cleaners down the toilets and drains ends up in our waterways and in our fish, since they aren't biodegradable. Our septic systems are designed to remove bacteria, but not necessarily other chemicals such as phosphates. Best practices include a vegetated shoreline, which helps to absorb these products before they reach the water. However, it's important to choose biodegradable, phosphate-free products. Using fertilizers, the chemicals eventually flow into the nearby water bodies. This accelerates algae and aquatic plant growth, including blue-green algae, which can be also harmful to human health and animal species. The water becomes cloudy and poorly oxygenated. Best practices include using natural compost. Compost can be easily made from your own kitchen and garden waste. Using pesticides ends up harming wildlife. Pesticides, which don't biodegrade, leak into the water bodies. These accumulate in fish, reptiles, and amphibians living in the water, affecting their metabolism and creating health issues. Best practices include using natural alternatives to pesticides. It has been found that the more biodiverse a garden is, the less there is a need for pesticides. Road salt used on roads and pathways in the winter finds its way into our waterways and can have negative impacts on vegetation, water pH, and thus water quality. Best practices include using as minimal amounts as possible. For example, it has been found that 1 cup is enough for a 2-car driveway. There are some alternatives to road salt that can be explored, such as sand and ash. Mowing lawns and cutting trees and shrubs right up to the water's edge is not recommended. Manicured lawns usually require fertilizers and pesticides. Best practices include adding clover, leaving grass cuttings and dead leaves on the lawn, as well as diversifying the lawn by adding native plants and flowers. Design and construct your waterfront optimally. How your waterfront is designed and constructed can also impact the health of our waterways. Let's compare an optimal shoreline versus an inappropriate shoreline design. Slow down water runoff. By reducing the runoff of rainwater into the river, you also reduce the pollutants and sediments entering it. Ideally, your waterfront is designed to enable absorption of rainwater, before running off over impermeable surfaces directly into the waterways. Direct the water from the gutters of your buildings into barrels, bushes, or rain gardens. Permeable surfaces and paths made of materials such as stone dust allow for more absorption than impermeable materials such as cement and concrete. Maximize the vegetation along the shoreline. Municipal regulations require a buffer zone of 15 meters of trees and shrubs along the shoreline. With their deep roots, shrubs and trees protect the shoreline from erosion, decrease runoff, and provide habitat to fauna. We will talk more about how to revegetate or regenerate your shoreline a bit later. Municipal regulations allow you to clear an opening of a maximum of 5 meters wide to access the water. The pathway to the water should be sinuous or diagonal to slow down and divert the runoff, as opposed to a pathway that is directly perpendicular to the shoreline. Dock construction. Your dock should allow water and fish to move freely and must not cause any modification or degradation to the shoreline. Thus, they must be built on stilts, on piles, or be converted to a floating structure. Avoid toxic chemical paints and finishes that can leak into the water. Shoreline regeneration. As already mentioned, the healthiest shoreline is a living shoreline full of native trees, shrubs, and grasses, as well as biodiverse fauna. Cultivated grass alone is not enough. If your shoreline is lacking vegetation, you can either renaturalize by letting the natural vegetation grow back, or regenerate by planting a variety of plants, shrubs, and trees. To regenerate, choose the plant species that are right for the specific conditions, such as the amount of sun, the slope of the shoreline, the type of soil, and the wetness of the soil. Choose native and local species. Native species will require no fertilizers and minimal nursing compared to horticultured species. They'll have a higher likelihood of survival. Let's discuss in more detail what to plant. We'll categorize them in terms of trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants. Please note the legend for the symbols describing each plant, which indicate wetness requirements, width, and height of each species. Planting trees a bit farther back from the water's edge will create a deep root system that will stabilize a large part of the shoreline, prevent erosion from runoff, protect from ice impact, as well as filter underground water pollutants. The branches and leaves provide shade to fish and animal habitat. Some examples of recommended local native trees include red or silver maple, yellow birch, as well as white spruce and eastern white cedar. Planting shrubs or low-growing woody plants provides food and habitat for birds and small mammals. They also provide services such as soil retention and erosion prevention. Examples of local native shrubs include common winterberry, sweet gale, American elder, and red osier dogwood. Planting herbaceous plants and grasses close to the water's edge will greatly beautify the shoreline with flowers and berries. The pollen and seeds are loved by pollinators, birds, and small mammals. They provide a habitat and nesting ground for birds and amphibians. Their roots also help in filtering water, stabilizing the shoreline, and protecting from wave erosion. Some local examples include blue flag iris, black-eyed Susans, blue joint grass, and purple joe-eyed weed. In addition to all the shoreline protection services, the shoreline vegetation greatly adds to the beautification of your property. The Gatineau River is still one of the cleaner rivers in Quebec, but we all have to do our part to protect the shorelines and maintain its health and water quality for future generations. We hope that this video has provided you with useful recommendations for what you can do to improve your shoreline activities and waterfront design. This video was brought to you by the Friends of the Gatineau River, otherwise known as FOG. This project was funded by the Lapache Green Fund. For more information, please check out our website. You can also visit your municipal websites for more information on regulations.